live any second. Okay. All right, so just looking over last week's discussion, I mean, we used the bulk of the time. I guess it was 2 weeks ago because we guessed last Monday was a holiday, but we ended up using the bulk of the time to kind of pre-discuss what we talked about in our meeting just now. Let's see. I don't think we have to repeat any of that discussion here on this call.
Maybe a link to Bryce's notes if possible, though I know they were sparse.
I thought it's okay. Yeah, let's just keep digesting it. I think it's great to have. I don't want to use also this time.
They're just in the admin.
No.
They're just in the admin notes. They're like, you can see them in the admin notes, but I can try.
The admin channel? Okay.
Yes, yeah. Admin, it's a tab, the admin meeting living agenda.
Okay.
Is where there are. That's all. I'm filling in a few other things that I'm like remembering that I missed that I thought were good points, but
okay.
Yeah, it's like
I just meant if we could put the link, not discuss, just put the link in the document.
Yeah, it just was a little cut off.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
You said I just heard your notes. I thought you were saying review the notes. It actually, I mean, it could be helpful to add stuff as it's fresh, but on the other hand, I think we won't be able to have that discussion now.
No, yeah. I'm trying to figure out just how to get a link to this agenda. I'll put it in the dev, the backend notes now though. Let's figure out how this works.
Right. So yeah, I have a couple open PRs. I might start looking through some of the existing stuff too to pick off things that are open issues. So we can talk about that. Michelle, you had an issue that wasn't very specified, just says ale kiln from our last meeting. I don't know if there's anything new.
I have no idea.
Want to talk about? Okay. Yes.
There were a few standing kiln things.
Okay.
There's one new one that popped up recently that I think you ran into, Quinn.
The uploading files.
But there were some other changes to kiln stuff that I know
I used it for the first time
in
a while, so I just ran into some things I opened issues for.
Yeah. Well, mostly noting that that some of those issues are potentially addressed and are in the horrible thing I do all the time where I will bring a branch like 90% of the way and then just not finish it or try and get it merged. That's essentially what the state of that is right now. And if we pushed a little harder, we could do that. And if I could scope and just push on that one thing, I could try and do that.
I opened it on Kiln on the Playground. Is it more properly on AL Kiln? Is it really it's an issue?
Well, the issue is in Kiln the Playground, but the fix is in Kiln, and the fix is
about being flexible about where uploads come from, basically. Or
yes,
which would let it work in the Playground.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, we totally forgot about uploads.
Any other items to add to the agenda? We'll just stop at 12:30. Makes sense to everybody else. So it'll be a short agenda.
I have a very short. Yeah, I can keep it short. I have I guess just one question to make sure I'm trying to do things, make APIs right for the e-filing stuff, but it could be pretty quick.
All right, that'd be great because I feel like we kind of leave you on your own with the e-filing stuff. Probably too much, right? So.
No, that's fair. I will bear the burden of Java. It's not even Java.
Well, have you seen the whole stuff around Java 22 and how much easier it is? I think.
No, honestly, I haven't seen that.
There's a lot less boilerplate that comes with the very newest release of Java that I guess came out maybe last week. I just saw a bunch of memes about it. I
Oh,
hadn't seen
cool.
them
Okay.
a week before. Not sure that we're able to.
We probably aren't able to work with it because there's a lot of extra dependencies we have that are all older things, but it's at least good to know.
Yeah.
I can take a look into
What
some of that
Java
stuff.
are we on?
We're on Java 17, and the bigger thing that we're on is like CFX, and I think that doesn't require. I think that I just started working with like 19, maybe. There's a limit on how high it goes, but yeah.
Okay. Oh, there is one more e-filing thing I could raise, which is, well, I guess we're going to get to agenda and probably almost there's very little discussion, but that's okay. Maybe talk about it with you offline, Bryce. But basically, I've been doing some work with Missouri on a HUD-funded project. They have, looks like a homegrown e-filing system, or at least it's not very widespread, but it's built around ECF and SOAP.
Okay.
And they have money in this HUD grant that has to be spent by a certain time, I think, maybe, and maybe want to get support for e-filing. I'm curious to know if it's a project for Suffolk, if it's something you might want to take on, if it's just not realistic at all.
Okay.
Might be the answer. I'll maybe we can talk
We
about
can we can chat through it here, or we can chat through it separately. Yeah.
I started to look through it, and it looks like it's a little bit different model. Like they talk about client, which implies to me they imagine a client doing all the communications. We've been building our own server. I guess that maybe that
we have the ability to do a lot of that stuff. It's not super polished, honestly, because Tyler doesn't make it easy to like test or check or do any communications, and they do a lot of communications as well. And so we have the ability to. It's just it might not be quite there yet in terms of what's actually useful for people.
It looks way simpler, though, is to say. Like it's more like what I envisioned the project was going to be when I was like, oh yeah, we should be able to integrate with the third party,
which is good.
Send them a document.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good.
It's that, but in an ECF envelope. So yeah, it'd be interesting to look at it more, but it doesn't have to be now. Okay. One question I had was about PRs. Like, yeah, let me know, Bryce. So I was just realizing, like, you're doing all these PRs on the e-filing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fine if you don't want feedback on them. But I'm wondering if that is a mode which would be easier for you with some of the Weaver stuff. I default to adding you as a reviewer.
What's the question again?
Question is, do you want to be a reviewer on all of these PRs? Do you want me to just kind of go through and merge things that are relatively straightforward, other than bug fix?
I'm okay with reviewing them, and whether or not, like, with the clarification that I get the thing slowly. I think I have like one. I read through the code of the multi-select one maybe, and I was going slow on actually like testing it since I wanted to sort of play around with it myself. And that's why I hadn't submitted it yet. So essentially, like, if you're okay, the clarification being within 2 or 3 days, I'll probably have a chance to like actually run it and fully do the review. You can merge it before or after if it makes sense, if it's like you're okay with getting comments on a closed PR. And would like can make those into issues, or just do a quick PR and merge it immediately with like any fixes or like changes based on those comments.
Yeah,
I don't really mind. So yeah.
With that, maybe I should just merge these that don't really have a lot to comment on.
That's fair. Yeah, you can.
Those two.
That would be good with me.
It's merged. That way it's not a priority for you. Okay. Because it can be a lot of work you could spend all your day reviewing PRs. The busier I am, I don't want to make it more work for you.
No, for sure. And I have fallen into that trap sometimes. I've been trying to be a bit better. And I guess the way I have found that it works a bit better for me, if it's just like, yeah, I have to wait for this to build anyway, I'll spend 20 minutes looking through it and like another, like maybe trying to run it and stuff. And if I run into something that is like broken, and it's usually just something that's broken on my end for like my local DocuSimple thing, then I just set it down for a bit, and then I come back to it like later in the day. So
This was one where we needed more discussion. You reviewed it after it was merged. The metadata question,
that was the metadata question.
where to advertise certain things. Maybe we should add that for next week's. Just remembering this now. That should have never opened up a agenda item for it. I don't remember if we need to, but I'm just realizing we only have like 15 minutes to discuss.
Yeah, and it's not. I don't think it was a priority. That was the main end of. I think the only reason I had tried to bring it up at one point on a Friday just to make sure we had landed on the same thought and to clear up anything, because I know it was a multiple long back and forth. So
Yeah. I don't even remember exactly. Oh, okay. It was about basically where to define a value in the metadata block and then refer to it, or in the code or some variant of code. So that which is interesting. It basically is a question of like, what's metadata and how do we use it? But the practical question was defined by whether we want to, it's more of a user experience question, essentially, really, like for the court.
For me, it comes down to being a really minor question of like some extra duplication, like one of like, whether or not something gets duplicated somewhere else, or like one thing gets duplicated somewhere else outside of the metadata. It would just not super important. It's like a thing that it's like, if we want to go down to it, it's like, I don't think we need that duplication, but it's also so minor that it's really not worth acting on it right now if we don't know, if we aren't super sure that it's the right way. And I think the bigger use of that whole conversation for me was understanding how we actually use the allowed ports and like what are our expectations there. And I learned a lot from that anyways. Whether or not we change anything, I thought it was a really useful conversation.
And if there's any other questions you have about it, I'm happy to tell you more about like my thoughts and experiences with when court selection matters. Because it seems like I guess there's an architectural question there too, right? Which, as you're starting to refactor some of the e-filing stuff, I would
there was
a duplication of some things that might be too rigid or fragile if we couple them tightly to how we define assembly line stuff. So that might be a good discussion.
And that's fair. And I do think I like mentioned that, and then pretty quickly was like, you're right, it's not the right place to try and put e-filing stuff in. And it was more of a very high, I don't know the word, cloud in the sky idea. Like of maybe this might work, and I hadn't really thought it through past for more than a minute. Also changing the dates because today is the 5th.
Oh yeah, you're right. This is the wrong day. This is going to be the 12th, I guess. Thank you. Worth writing that thought down.
Okay.
That's good. So that's good. I think we finished the PRs. I'll let you review the one that's really not urgent and has more room for feedback, and I'll merge the ones that are ready to go.
Okay.
I think basically, if there wasn't a thought, if the issue was there and was uncontroversial, and I don't think there's a lot of room for discussion on the code, I'll tend to merging, but I'll still add you as a reviewer if you want to have thoughts later. If it's something where there's more debate and the PR was the first time we had a chance to have a discussion, I'll leave it open longer. I don't think any of these are really urgent. I do want to kind of use the summer to make big improvements to the Weaver before we have a new group of students. It's kind of the only time. So you want to do the e-filing API stuff? Yeah,
I would share screen to show things, but it's not something I really have showable yet. I guess it will still help to just show what we're doing now. Essentially, I don't like doing it, but I do think we essentially need to we'll need to do like an API breaking change. We'll need to do a breaking change with the EFSP API, essentially because like right now, and it was like a thing that I know you mentioned a few times when we were sort of doing our initial Tyler Glishquin of like, you call the proxy server with passing, you pass some JSON to it, and it sends back JSONized, or essentially the proxy server gets back an XML response from like all of Tyler's e-filing stuff. And the way that Java works automatically puts that into a Java object. And there's no easy way for us to then reply with, like, turn it back into XML, like the original thing it was. And the thing, it's a little bit clearer if it's an XML. There's no easy way for us to just turn it back into XML and send it back. And so we have been sending back the Java object, which gets turned into JSON, which is really messy and confusing. But it worked, and it like gave us all the information we needed. However, it's very specifically tied to ECF4, which is just the current version of e-filing stuff. And Tyler is now slowly moving to certain jurisdictions, like Texas, I think, is starting to move to ECF5. Illinois might be soon. I don't know if they're doing like a nationwide switch all at once, but I think they're going to do certain jurisdictions before other ones. All that to say, we can't, like, we could just, like, when something starts using ECF5, we start sending back everything in ECF5, but the structure of the response is going to look completely different. And at the slight risk of there are 14 competing standards, let's make another one to fix all of them. There are now 15 competing standards. It's sort of the only thing we can do is take out all of the information that we're currently using and like just put it in like our own little Java object, such that it's a lot simpler and we can make the ECF4 and the ECF5 responses look exactly the same, such that the like Python code on DocAssemble doesn't need to notice if something's running on ECF4 or ECF5, which is the point of the proxy server. Like, we're trying to make it easy to interact with all of these potentially different e-filing solutions. Right. And we can just do stuff. And so the question specifically, with the background out of the way, the question specifically I had was, so for an example, we have, like, this is all of the Python code that is going through. And let's look at like an example one of parsing a phone number. We get back essentially a big JSON object that's nested in several ways. It has an attribute name that might be equal to full telephone number. And then we go and it has value, has an object that has an attribute called telephone full ID. That's associated with an object that has another thing called value. Essentially, like, I'll let you say that that's like the weird Java, or that's the weird JSON we get back. My question was, would the right way to go about making this ID would be to currently look at all of the code on the DocAssemble side, look at like every bit of information that we're using. Like, we grab the phone number from certain things, we grab like people's names, we grab as much of it, information about the case as we can that we like know is there. Get all of those pieces of information and then just put them into like a simple JSON response that we get back, and would not be nested in this weird like value, telephone full ID value way. It would just be one thing, and it's called telephone.
Right.
Like, do that essentially, and then that's our new API. Like, we can just set that as our new API, and I can add that to DocAssemble such that it understands when it gets a response. It could be this weird nested thing, but it also could be this very simple thing. The downside I could think of that is that I will only be able to do that with ECF4 and ECF5 stuff. And it also is sort of limited to what we're currently doing with this we get back all of this detailed information, and I'm only going to strip it back such that we now only get a much smaller subset of that information. And if that would be the right way of trying to make an API standard in that way. it makes things a bit less flexible, but I'm not worried about people not being able to look at some very specific piece of information about a case, because I don't think anyone will be doing that. We aren't doing that, and so that's that.
What do you think about like making it be like, hey, here's a data structure with everything, not for something, not down to the granular level of phone number, but like if we could let people access the raw response and just map everything to docassemble and assembly line object conventions, that makes sense to me. That's basically what you're saying, right? Like do a mapping of everything to a simple value.
Sort of, but so essentially the thing I was trying to avoid was essentially like all of this code is in Python and it's on the like docassemble side of things. And if we to do it so we can just map to like assembly line and docassemble ways of looking at stuff. To do that, we would just have to duplicate like this entire file and a lot more of this file. Actually, this one maybe not as much. We'd have to duplicate a lot of stuff essentially to work with both the ECF4 and the ECF5 parts.
Okay.
Such that, and it's still one of those things, if anyone ever, we have a raw Python client, no one's really used it yet, but if anyone ever wanted to, they'd start have to doing the same sort of things. And so my main thought was instead of trying to add a whole bunch of extra, and we do some of these things here, but we also times where we don't. Essentially, like it makes, I was trying to consolidate so there's not like 3 or 4 different places where we would need to change this mapping from what we get back from the EFSP and put it into our assembly line objects, and just there can be one mapping from what we get from the proxy server to our assembly line objects. The proxy server knows all the differences between ECF4 and ECF5 and can smartly map to those things. And the downside is that if someone eventually asks us like, hey, I wanted to know the case numbers reference to this other case, like something very specific that EFF, like the Tyler stuff may be giving us, we'd have to then add it still in both places. But it makes, as opposed to just like, oh, here's all the raw data on the Python side, do something with it there. But it does make it easier for someone like all of our code to just start working with ECF5.
I think that makes sense. So I misunderstood where you were thinking of simplifying it, but I still do think it makes sense to have a way for people to get the raw data, but discourage it, right? Because we can't predict necessarily everything everybody needs. But I also agree we should continue to try to handle the cases people bring to our attention. Start with the ones we know we need and are using. And that kind of makes sense if you think abstractly about if you were like naively thinking, hey, I need to drop this file off at the clerk's desk, what's the equivalent electronically? Give me the simplest thing for that. Start with that idea in your head. And even if we're not doing it in an existing docassemble interview, handle those things.
I see. So you're thinking on
still get the raw things somehow.
Okay, so you're thinking on the proxy server having, I don't know if I want to be really restful with it, but essentially like being able to say, oh, give me the simple version through like an HTTP header or something, or give me everything to like the same endpoint essentially.
Or if it's a dictionary data structure, just have it be like a raw key in the dictionary that you return as the full response. So it's 2 representations. The simplified stuff is at one top level.
Like data and like all data or raw data or something.
Okay.
That's a pattern I've used when and it's sometimes helpful because it just lets you like slowly refactor to the more defined and documented and supported version of it without stopping you from doing things that the person didn't expect up front.
Yeah.
Lets me develop quickly. So I do that even if I'm the only person consuming my API. Maybe that's the best time I should be doing it. Maybe I shouldn't use it other times. I mean, you get people relying on it, which is maybe bad, but it doesn't mean you're not as tied to working on things right away.
You
Okay.
can start it with an underscore and then it's their own fault if it changes.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
Which is what I guess is probably Jonathan's thinking. It's like, you weren't supposed to use that hidden field when he broke our Weaver today.
Okay.
He was like, you shouldn't have been going in and editing and looking at the parse.py file. So I think that's fair, but it means like you can be a little slower to add new things people need if you need to. Because
That's
how
fair,
often do
though.
things like this transition happen from ECF to ECF 4 to 5? There's some warning, there's a transition time. You're like, okay, we're putting this on our backlog. For now, do this, but refactor away from it by X date. That lets both people work at a pace that's easy to communicate and explain and understand.
That's fair. That makes sense, I guess. Yeah. Okay.
I like the idea of having a simple representation of the things we know people need and making that easier to access. That sounds great.
Mhm. Okay. And I guess that makes sense. So that's a better approach. Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. Thanks. I think that's honestly, I think good enough for like, I am now on the right rails how to think about this. But yeah.
Yeah, I get. If you run into something like that, let me know, because it's like that's my default way of thinking of it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't have enough experience to thought of the pitfalls to my suggestion, but okay. But that's where that's the only advice I can give you for now anyway.
That's fair. It does duplicate some of the like actual stuff we send back, but it's not like megabytes of data really. It gets pretty gnarly sometimes, but it's not like huge. So
make it a parameter that people are really forced to say, I really want the extra stuff.
Yeah, that might be a thing to do at some point. Okay.
Before we switch off of you, I guess.
Yes.
Just understanding better now the issue Caroline was running into is very specific to trying to run I'm feeling lucky, and she's getting an error with the array size stuff, which I think has to do with whatever version of like the size.
Yeah, I remember saying that. That was
What?
Well. Yeah.
I still feel like I don't really know when that happens and when it doesn't, and why is it not happening on our dev server? Is there do we have like a key installed a special way that you can't do by just installing FormFixer, the API key? But it's
Well, yeah, we have an API key for the tools.
It's not in the config. Where is it?
Is it not in the config?
I don't see it in the config. I was just trying to search for tools.cephalitlab.org, tried looking for everything that was called API key. It might have a totally different name, but I just didn't find through my quick find on the webpage.
Oh, crazy. I thought I had done all this.
Whatever it is, we just got to write it down somewhere. I feel like I'm confused by it every time. But maybe it was we installed FormFixer manually and put an environment variable in there somewhere. That's what I was wondering.
We haven't. I definitely want to like do an environment variable manually. It's possible that we've installed the FormFixer manually, and also added I guess it's really if we just added the Stacy stuff.
Or is it just installing Spacey? But no, the error seems to imply Spacey's installed. I don't know if you saw Caroline's message. It seems to imply Spacey was there because it wouldn't give an error about the array size. If it wasn't invoking Spacey, it would be a different error.
I think we mean different things when we say Spacey. When I say Spacey, I mean the Ian Core Web LG like model from Spacey. That's the thing that we don't install by default because it can add a whole bunch of extra memory pressure, like potentially 4 times 800 megs or something. All that to say, I think that's the thing you might have to install manually, which you
can't do Well, no, actually, there's a pip command to install it, right? You just have to know the exact version number.
You just have to know the exact version number. Yeah, so it's this package, and I think you can get that exact version number from. It's little.
So
I think this isn't. I think you have to go to, yeah, you go to here.
I mean, there's not too many people installing the Weaver, but it would be nice if we could get them to be able to do that
Well, okay,
somehow out of the
at one
box.
point this was so broken, and that was the whole point of doing all of this, was that like this
Yeah.
prevents things from breaking everything. And so I guess it still does
Is it still was broken, you think?
I thought it had been, especially for like if you aren't on the of how I don't know how big we're suggesting for DocAssemble stuff. We're suggesting 4 with like with a pretty big swap. If you're on anything smaller than 4, it will very much eat all of your memory.
Okay. But this is what we're using now on our dev server, right?
Yes,
So it's probably,
I think.
okay.
I don't know.
I know it's still really hard to install spacey models as dependencies. So we just, okay, so she just has to install this model and using the right pip command.
I'm
Not
going to
pip, direct.
propose something wild that you probably have discussed before, but the idea would be to put the form fixer stuff in its own package or module
It
or
is.
something that
is.
then you would, I mean, there are ways to include modules in Python modules conditionally, right? Or are there not ways to do that?
Spacey is
Yeah.
packaged a very particular way because of the very large size of its models, that any of the basics ways of doing it, it's unique to.
I'm
Well,
just
They
saying,
made some choices about it and how they build wheels. Some of them were
The
imposed on them by-
conditional installs are a thing. It's what I've thought about, and we could at least, but it still is that it's not.
I'm
I don't know.
to kind of sum up, just to is that people would have this is I'm feeling lucky, right? Is to have I'm feeling lucky on our servers, but to not have it on other people's servers.
That is.
just turn it off for people if they don't
Yes.
have
Yeah,
that installed. Well, I mean, we could have a better error message for sure. I'm not sure if turning it off is what we want. But the other option is just installing this when people install the Weaver and saying this is part of the Weaver. But I know the reasons we didn't, and that's what you're just saying, that it might be too big, but it doesn't feel like there was a point where it was just breaking the experience of using it on the dev server, and it's not doing that now. I thought it was also a DocAssemble bug involved that was causing part of the issue.
There are a lot of bugs, and I never know which one like is the one that finishes it, or like kills it.
Yeah.
And I could have sworn we are using tools on the dev server though, but I just don't know. I don't know where
I don't know how, because it's not in the configuration. But I don't know how it learns it, to be honest. It was a bit mysterious to me. So I didn't set it up, and I didn't try to go through it to figure it out.
Well, it's not. The thing is, it's not. It's not really that mysterious. It's just a matter of like what I had honestly ended up deciding, which I wasn't super sure. So it's just there's a parameter, and it takes a parameter tools token. Or what has happened?
But we're not passing it. Oh, I see what you're saying. Maybe, but we're not. But where would it get it from? No, I understand that part. I mean, I had to invoke it that far. I'm just not sure what it does when that's not provided.
If it's not provided, it tries to use large because it assumes you have large installed. And so I think the idea is Weaver, and that's the thing is I did all this in Form Fixer, and I don't know. We just didn't get to the Weaver.
I think it's just installed and it's using large, I guess. Yeah, I can look. I guess, let me see. It'll be listed on the package management menu. No. List. But it must be installed. I know I've installed it manually before. It wouldn't have come off on its own. Be nice to give people, we could just give them a documentation page that says, go to your package management page, install this specific wheel, right? Because that's something we can do. We don't have to use the Python-m spacey download.
Yes, yeah, that's what I
want to use.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to find. There's somewhere you can find like this exact thing to do. Maybe it's in requirements for some of our packages. Non-usable.
I feel like you shared it with me at least once.
Oh, sorry, my screen sharing where I thought it was. There it is. Kind of. This line is like you gotta copy paste all of that, and I think you can copy paste all of that into DocAssemble. I'm pretty sure it just takes that and runs
I think so
pip
too.
install on it, but I'm not super sure if it tries to do anything smart with it. It will likely try to break it.
And we'll just have to change that version number as their new wheels released.
Oh, I accidentally requested to share and I was not trying to screen record. Sorry.
Okay.
I mean, maybe it is.
If this is part of the requirements text for Form Fixer, does this run when you install?
Requirements never runs by itself.
It doesn't run by itself. Okay.
No, you always it gets we use it for like the GitHub actions,
right?
For like tests and stuff, but requirements is always something you have to manually run, like pip install requirements.
Got just the setup.py or whatever. There's the new TOML thing, and there were
setup.py is the one that needs to have everything for it to be installed when you run pip install form fixer or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, and so by default, we install the small one instead of the large one. And if you install the large one manually, then we'll use it, is how that is set up. And we could eventually change that to be, like Michelle, you were saying, there are Python conditional things where you would do like pip install form fixer, open square bracket, this option equals true or something, I think is the syntax for it. And we could eventually change that to like, yeah, install form fixer, open, or like install AL lever, open bracket, local form fixer or something like that, where it can run just by itself. And that would be the better way of doing it, but it's still kind of confusing. It doesn't work from GitHub. Or it doesn't work if you're installing the Weaver from GitHub. It would only be if you're installing it from PyPy. PyPy is not going to show those options when you like go to PyPy.
All right, so we could just try giving that line to Caroline and see if it lets her.
Yeah.
Or you try out the I'm feeling lucky.
That is the option, I think, yeah.
Okay. And then
was it 4.1?
We should actually add this somewhere to the information about the Weaver. Because that's where it's most relevant, I guess. Or maybe both, Form Fixer and the Weaver. But at least in Form Fixer, it's in the requirements text, so it's a little bit clearer. Should Form Fixer be a dependency now that it doesn't have this big model. It should probably just be a dependency of the Weaver, which it isn't yet as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it should be a
That
dependency
would
either
make
way.
sense to install it. Yeah. I mean, I feel fine with that. We just tell people, okay, if you want to use I'm Feeling Lucky, there's a manual step.
Mhm.
And we probably just have to add some try except to tell people, wait, we don't have that package. Maybe we can just do a pre-lookup and say that that thing's not installed, so you won't be able to use it. And there's 3 things. Okay. Document manual stuff. Was it in large web? In web large web. Checked. That's the first issue. Second issue is add user that work. They don't. Okay. So that's, I think that's good. That's good. Good set of to-do items there. Oh, actually, there's one more, which is actually integrate it with the tools.
Yeah, better integration with tools would definitely be better. Because honestly, this is the point of us having tools, and like I think we're okay
Yeah.
with.
That was why we had it. We could share it with
Yeah.
people too. We just have to request an API key basically with the instructions.
Yes, yeah.
I don't think there's any. I don't really know how it works. I think if you have too much usage, it might target you or something like that with the thing that David's using for that input.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't think anyone would have too much usage, really,
Yeah.
but
They'll use the Weaver like 20 times a year.
yeah.
Fine. Okay. Anything to talk about with Kiln that would be a blocker, Michelle?
I mean, there's lots of stuff that would be good. I think we'll just keep going on where we're going. I don't want to, there's a PR I want to make that I'm telling you about, Bryce. I don't think you have time to look at it. So I'm thinking I just merge it because I don't want to put more on your plate. I don't know if you think you're going to have time in the next week or so, it's not a huge rush.
Which PR is this?
I haven't made it yet because I
Oh.
didn't want you to get pinged and then go do that and be, and stuff your schedule more.
At the point
but
where I'm okay with starting. Like if you ping me on things, I will avoid. I'll let you know if I just can't get to it.
Okay, all right,
within
then
the
I'll
next
make
2 or
my
3 days.
PRs when I make them. And
Yes.
yeah, and then just let me know. And if you can't get to it within the next week or so, I mean, it's just worth discussing how we want to, I guess that's more the blocker is how we want to deal with PRs and stuff right now when you're already kind of schedule's already full up. So you have any thoughts on that? I mean, I could just merge and then we deal with the consequences later. It's not going to be, the code won't be as good quality. That's kind of like, there's plenty to discuss if we wanted to discuss or if we had bandwidth to discuss, but like in the PRs, I mean. But if you don't, I could just merge stuff. feel like it's not a rush, so I feel like it could wait. I just worry about building stuff up. I'm trying to work on the random input PR now anyway, so the
Mhm.
other one could wait, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts for stuff like that is like um let it sit for like a day, and if I happen to get to it within like a day or two, then I'll be like, oh cool, like this is good, and have like a quick or like a few quick things. If I don't, if I'm able to if I'm able to look at it and be like, actually there might be a bigger issue, like pump the brakes on this one for a bit.
Okay.
Or if and then if I just like don't respond or aren't able to get to it, then like it's probably fine. Like just go I don't think I'll be like pump the brakes really that often unless it's like, oh, this is a big security thing that I've just noticed. And I don't think those pop up really often. So
Okay.
I
I'm
think most
also
of the time
okay.
margin is okay.
I'm also okay with having like long drawn out. Like it's not my favorite thing, but if
It's not my favorite thing either. And I think that the long drawn out thing is the thing that like will
Okay,
make
will
me
kill you.
anxious because I know that I know that I am the one holding it up. It sort of sits there and is I am drawing it out. And
I feel
so
like you're not, but okay. I understand if you feel that way. I disagree
If-
with you, but
if specifically we're leaving it open until I get to it,
Mhm.
then I am like is sort of like is what it
Okay,
is. And even if it's like, yeah, the pressure is not, it's one of those I have like a mental tick that
fair
it
enough.
makes it is hard for me to sometimes forget about like, oh yeah, I need to do this thing. And so
Maybe the better
Yeah.
way to put it is I appreciate the input enough that I don't care if it's hanging, but I understand having that mental thing in the back of your head that's like, I
Yeah.
have a thing that's not done. So that's fine.
yeah, so that's what I've landed. And I think that's like the same thing I was saying to Quentin earlier. Like that's sort of personally what I've landed on is like I will do my best to get to them, but I might not be able to get to them within like 2 or 3 days, and feel free to just merge if I don't. So
Sure. Sure. Okay. Cool.
sorry, I do feel bad trying to take myself out like this, but I notice myself
You have
like
a
getting
lot to
very
do.
nerd. I feel like I really mostly it's just I get really nerd sniped if I don't, and I will immediately be like, oh, there are other things like this shouldn't be too hard to fix, and then it will be the end of the day, and I'm like, oh, I wrote one line of EFSP code and I wrote a lot more of like Weaver code or whatever. So
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
partially my own issues there, but yeah,
Good
thanks.
it's a good self-awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good to build structure around that kind of stuff. Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I think that was actually really good to discuss, and that was probably the most important thing to discuss right now. So I'm good.
Cool.
Very good.
All right. Okay. Good. We have some stuff for next week, and I think we're all productive meetings. I'll try. Yeah, I'll keep in mind trying to keep the burden of PRs low. I'll still
Mhm.
ping you on them, but merge them when I think there's not much to really discuss. Just so you can more easily see them, or I don't even have to do that for some. I'm not doing that for any things that are just like there's an issue and a bug, and it passed the test. So
That's fine. Yeah.
all right. Okay. All right. Talk to everybody later.
Good.
That's good.
Bye.